talk to you today about is my latest research on degendering gendered occupations. And one way to try and do this is to analyse the professional discourse. So to really explore what goes on in workplaces, more importantly, how our jobs actually performed through language, rather than just following these entrenched stereotypical notions that Western society has about certain skills and characteristics needed to perform these occupations, and moreover, whether men or women have such skills. So this talk is based on research from my forthcoming book, Degendering Gendered Occupations, Analysing Professional Discourse. And you can see here there's a link there. This is now available to pre-order on Routledge. It is also available through Amazon and other booksellers as well. This book is an edited collection, and it is a lovely variety of other researchers also examining men in non-traditional or stereotypical female occupations and how they perform the role in order to degender society's attitudes to these jobs and how these jobs can be performed. So, the Festival Ideas has shifted towards including something in and around COVID-19 and the effects of this. So what I have chosen to do is to discuss nursing, because obviously with the NHS being a major player in the pandemic and how we've survived it, and finally gaining the prestige that the workers should always have had, I think this fits really nicely with my research. So what will the effects of COVID-19 be, not just on our society, but on our healthcare system? So this is one area that has been greatly affected in both the UK, but of course all across Europe and internationally as well. At time of writing this, at the start of June, we had an estimation of approximately 46,000 deaths in the UK during the virus. Now, this was the more realistic number that the government were putting forward, rather than the slightly lower approximation at that time. So the NHS has been a vital resource at the forefront of this crisis. And as a result, what people are actually finding, and people in the nursing institution, is that the interest in having a nursing career over the past few months in the UK has soared. So here we have just one example taken from The Independent, and this is obviously just addressing the problem that there's a lack of university training places as this interest surges. And although we have had record recruitment in the last 5 years, NHS still has a shortage of nurses. So it's a good recruitment level, but it's not high enough to get us up to the level that we need. And this has been a real problem with this pandemic, a shortage of nurses. And I just read yesterday that they are talking about trying to train lots more in case of a second wave. And if you'll recall, other nurses and doctors, etc., had to be brought out of retirement as well. So the fact that we're really short on nurses has always been a problem, and something I have long been arguing since I started this research well over 10 years ago. However, it's only really become really transparent now when something like this pandemic hits. So the NHS has long battled with a shortage of around 40,000 nurses. But because of this COVID-19 crisis, thousands more people have become interested in becoming a nurse. And this is again taken from The Independent. Between the month of March and April, nearly 75,000 people clicked on the nursing pages of the NHS Health Careers website. So this is what the media are using as examples of people who are of the increased interest in becoming. So what is the problem exactly then that my research has been trying to address? Not the problem so much of the shortage of nurses, we know that's there, that's really, really evident now, but why? Why do we have this shortage? What's causing this shortage and how can we possibly address it? So if we think about jobs, a lot of occupations in the UK, but of course across the rest of the world as well, are segregated by gender or gendered beliefs, assumptions of skills and characteristics that are needed to do a job. So whether men and women can do a certain job, will be competent in a certain job. So we have these terms, masculinized and feminized jobs, and this is certainly used in my area of gendered language, workplace discourse, to describe a job's staff composition. So Hupatz and Goodwin have sort of given this statistical number that you can class a job as feminized if you have a female staff composition of more than 70%. Based on that then, nursing is certainly arguably a female-dominated occupation. The sex composition is predominantly more than women at the minute, 2019, more than 85% of the staff population were female. This hasn't changed much over the last so many years. It fluctuates, it goes up and down. On top of that, then nursing, as well as the staff composition, you need to look at the characteristics assumed necessary to do the job. So a feminized role deemed by society as appropriate only for those with feminine characteristics entails that you cannot perform the job of the other because you are not biologically born with these characteristics. And this is the problem of assuming sex and gender are interchangeable. They're the same thing. They're not. So obviously it's argued then that sex is your biological construct, your genitalia, for example, but your gender is more the cultural beliefs that go along with this biology. So we need more nurses. There is a huge untapped pool of potential nurses in the UK, men. Less than 15% of our nurses are men. So there is plenty of pool out there that we can dip into. But yet, despite government trying many incentives to recruit more, sorry to use the marked term, but male nurses, there are specific recruitment drives to recruit nurses that are men. This doesn't increase. We don't see men entering into these jobs. So why? What is one of the barriers? Now, I am in no way arguing that there is just one barrier here and that we can fix it. There are many interchangeable barriers, which I'll discuss very briefly, that all need addressed. But trying to rethink about the job and the characteristics needed to do the job, the ideology behind the job, and realizing that these characteristics and skills, the linguistic behaviour, is not gendered. It is not linked to one sex or the other. Anyone can perform these characteristics. So the issue is caring. Caring is the ideology behind nursing. It is seen as the key characteristic to this job. And you can actually, in the new Routledge handbook that I have coming out, you can have a read of a chapter of the discourse of caring, which I've collaborated with people in Chile and also in New Zealand. So we have some cross-national and international data there that looks at different types of caring and men's performance of this role. So the issue is it's often not regarded as a hegemonic masculine trait. It's not seen as something as men have. Society's view of real men revolves around traditional masculine stereotypes of strength, leadership skills. And again, these leadership skills are stereotyped as something that should be aggressive and so on, about heterosexuality, authority. So hegemonic masculinity is defined in opposition to femininity and homosexuality. These are the others. Therefore, hegemonic masculinity is seen as different from, but also superior to, femininity and other forms of masculinities, including homosexuality. Therefore, young boys are taught from a very young age that they can't associate with anything or shouldn't associate with anything that is seen to be female, seen to belong to women, because this makes them less of a man. And this is no different from work. So women's work activities are perceived to have lesser status than men's. Men entering into this area then initiate a challenge to these traditional ideas of what is appropriate gender behaviour and what it means to be a real man. So the role of nursing itself, incorrectly, lacks prestige, status, and is very lowly paid. Now, the COVID-19 crisis might change this because people are finally realising that these jobs are key, they're hard, that it's not something that should be regarded as low status and low pay. But currently it has been. Therefore, this has led to some incorrectly questioning whether men can do caring at all. The first question you might ask is, well, how can men be fathers then? Because if they can't care, how can they care for their children? And this type of rhetoric would argue that they don't care in the same way as a mother cares. Instead, the caring comes from the more breadwinner, providing type of element. So again, these long-lasting, entrenched assumptions of the type of caring men can do, if they can care at all, it's not a hegemonic characteristic, has questioned whether men can go into nursing, whether they should. Now, the problem with this idea, however, is that it's led to the assumption that they can't be carers, and the men who do go into caring have had their identity threatened. So especially in the Western society, there's these stereotypical views that men who go into caring are homosexual, that they're viewed with suspicion. Why would they want to go into a job that is beneath them in some way because it's a woman's job? They mustn't be real men. So the summary of the study, sort of what I'm talking about today, was based on a piece of research that I performed over the last few years looking at nurses in the UK and Northern Ireland. And also then this has led to some collaboration with other scholars who are studying nurses in New Zealand, but also in Chile and Brazil. So we see these same patterns everywhere, that there are a really extreme shortage of nurses who are male, and no matter how much we try and recruit them, they're not going into the job. So this study I'm talking about today is based on the discursive behaviour of nurses in their environment. So we were interested in men's discursive behaviour and how they constructed their identity with this arguably feminised occupation of nursing. And rather just assuming that they perform the job in a different way, or that they couldn't do it because they can't care or can't show that they care, instead I wanted to look at their linguistic behaviour. How did they actually perform the job through the language? What is the relationship going on between gender, professional communication, and the workplace culture? So of particular interest was whether the men's use of language was used to enact and reflect a masculine identity in line with hegemonic characteristics aforementioned. Or were they performing an identity more indexical of the environment in which they work, arguably then a caring environment? Based on this data then and the information that we get from this research, can we then use that to challenge these entrenched stereotypical beliefs about gender? That certain jobs are only suitable for certain people due to their gender. We have seen a huge push for women to enter into STEM subjects over the past few years, which is wonderful. But we're not seeing the same drive for men to enter into what are considered female jobs. Why is this? Why are we not seeing that men can be told they can be anything they want to be? Obviously, because women have long been told they are only certain roles they can do, and now this is finally slowly changing. But why are we not encouraging more men into these roles? Is it because that we have not got gender equality yet, that women's jobs are still of lesser valued than men's? So why would a man then want to enter into this role? Is it the challenges that society gives them? A lot of my nurses, when interviewed, said, well, people may assume I'm gay or expect me to want to be a doctor. Well, surely this is only something you're doing for a while, yes? You know, it's only temporary. And this is where we have this glass escalator. So where we hear about women reaching a glass ceiling that it's very hard for them to get promoted up to the upper ranks, men in female jobs tend to be on this glass escalator, or they can get pushed or kicked up the stairs, even if they want to remain a nurse. So what do we do about this? How can we challenge society's continuing entrenched beliefs that many jobs and what it takes to perform them, or because of what it takes to perform them, are gendered? Well, let's think about being a nurse. So performing a nursing identity, overriding that of a performance of a gendered identity. So my research examines how nurses perform these roles linguistically on the ground. And what I've found through collecting data from both male and female nurses in a range of contexts for well over a year, recording their interactions with other nurses, hours and hours and hours of data, their interactions show that the male nurses participate appropriately in their community of practice. In other words, they demonstrate their in-group nursing identity. Now, this challenges a lot of previous research on male nurses, which was based on interview-only based data, where male nurses were often found to self-report to differentiate themselves from their female colleagues. Remember, hegemonic masculinity is not femininity. So these men would often find or carve a masculine niche for themselves. So they might say, well, I'm there to deal with the male patients. I'm there to help control angry patients or lift heavy patients, or I help with the technology. Whereas the actual caring, so the cleaning up of sick, maybe changing of underwear, the feeding of the patients was left to women. However, in my data, this is not what I find. The nurses, instead of trying to separate themselves from the female colleagues, use language to create and maintain a group collective with certain colleagues. So this is colleagues on their own ward, based on their nursing identity. And this was regardless of audience gender, it was regardless of conversational topic, and it was regardless of speaker status. So whether it was a charge nurse or a staff nurse. So just to clarify, a charge nurse is the nurse that is in charge of the ward. Staff nurses are the ones who just would work on the ward under the charge nurse. I didn't find that the male nurses oriented to any hegemonic norms of masculinity or what has been classed as acceptable maleness. Instead, they use language to care, to show they were caring. They used a caring discourse. They used language to show teamwork, to perform relational practice. And what was even more interesting is they use language to bond in groups with the nurses on their ward. So this often meant gossiping about other nurses on other wards, or even other types of nurses, such as community nurses who work out in care homes, for example. So not only were nurses showing that they use the language and to bond with their in-group as an institution professionality of being a nurse, they also then had smaller communities that they showed that they belonged to. So their linguistic performance could to some extent be determined by the workplace culture, with the context, the work role, and the shared linguistic repertoire of the nursing setting having some form of influence on their linguistic choices. So consider the ideology of being a nurse. Nurses should be assertive but not aggressive. They should be caring, compassionate, emotionally intelligent. They should be collaborative to show teamwork. They should mitigate orders to gain patient compliance. And research has shown both nurses and doctors who use mitigation with their patients are a lot more successful in getting their patients to take their medication, to follow the doctor's and nurse's instructions. All of these features are regarded to be stereotypically female, stereotypically feminine linguistic styles. And yet, here we have both men and women in a nursing environment using these strategies to show that they belong, that they are performing the nursing. This is the linguistic repertoire of being a nurse. Now, you could argue that members can deviate from this identity. Remember, you can build your community from the ground up, but it is nutritious to them to belong. We are a species who is a social species. Prime example, social distancing at the minute, very, very hard for many because we are used to bonding, to meeting, to hugging, to having groups. It's how we are a social species. So it's nutritious for us to belong. It's also more beneficial to the job itself if you perform your job well. You will work more effectively as a team to achieve your shared work goals if you show that you belong and if you act as a team player. So what I've seen in my research is the nurses are using the language to create and perform a nursing identity to align themselves with their surrounding interactional context. What is evident is that these men are not struggling to preserve their masculinity at the expense of the nursing collective. So in other words, their nursing professional identity overrides that of their gender. They are doing being a nurse. So finally, nursing is often referred to as a feminine job because of its staff composition and these female characteristics, some of which I've just discussed, that are claimed to be needed for the role. But what has been interesting in these small preliminary studies, but of course if you look at the edited collection, we also look at teaching, primary school teaching, speech language therapists and midwives, these jobs that are always constantly seen as suitable for females, is that if we actually look at what constitutes effective nursing practice or effective practice in any occupation, has this anything to do with the feminine caring role? Well, no, the caring role shouldn't be feminine. The linguistic styles to perform this role shouldn't be seen as feminine. Instead, men and women are using the speech style needed in order to do being a nurse. It is not gendered. It is not sexed. Characteristics of effective nursing need not be sex specific, so that it is not only women that are seen to be effective in these roles, but rather anyone who can employ the linguistic styles needed to be an effective nurse. We have seen this in endless studies of women who enter into men's so-called jobs. We need more research into looking at the other way around. And this is what we're starting to do and we're starting to see. It works the same way. Both men and women make competent nurses. Gender should not be considered relevant to perform this work. Nursing should no longer be regarded as women's work. Describing nursing behaviour as female will only continue to deter men from this role or indeed any feminised occupation. By degendering society's attitudes to this occupation, we may see more men entering into the role. I'm not arguing one of the rhetorics as well that argue we need more men in the role to increase the status. I'm not arguing this at all. Instead, I'm not arguing we need men because men bring something else to the job or are better nurses than women. I'm arguing we need more male nurses because we need more nurses. We need competent, effective nurses that we need. And men are more than capable of performing this role and having these skills and characteristics as women. We need to increase our nursing pool, and this is a great untapped pool that we have in order to try and create this job equality, to have more male and female nurses. We need to try and degender this attitude to this occupation that it is only suitable for men. So if you're interested in reading more about this and also having a look at some data, I didn't discuss any data or show any data here. I think to try and explain that without sort of doing this face to face and handing out handouts, etc. It probably would have been a bit tricky, especially for anyone who was a non-linguist. But if you are interested in having a look at extracts of data, and of course having a look at a range of so-called traditional female jobs and how men perform them, please do have a look at the forthcoming book. And also I have listed in my here quite a lot of research where you can go and have a look at, again, extracts of data and see how they linguistically perform their job. Thank everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and please do email if you have any questions or you're interested in reading any of my articles. I can send them to you, or if you're just interested in learning more about the topic. Thank you very much.